Within all of us, there is a deep, uncharted ocean, a chamber full of secrets, untouched and waiting ever so patiently to be revealed. This ocean is, of course, the contents of our unconscious. In the words of Carl Jung, the sea is the favorite symbol for the unconscious. Like the sea itself, the unconscious yields an endless and self-replenishing abundance of creatures, a wealth beyond our fathoming. Said less poetically, the unconscious mind is a storehouse of our thoughts, memories, interests, urges, and motivations that we are not directly aware of. It is a reservoir of our personal truth, but also our personal shadow. But because of its quite literally unconscious nature, the unconscious is understandably difficult to access. In the same way that we can only safely look at an eclipse if we fashion a device to help us view it without searing our retinas, we cannot directly look at the unconscious. So we must use certain tools or look for its impressions in other ways. Throughout psychological history, there have been various tools used to tap into the potential of the unconscious, with one particularly popular method being dream work. It's believed by some psychologists that our dreams are full of symbols that the unconscious uses to grab our attention. For example, a dream about an apple could be a message from our unconscious about abundance or sexuality, as the apple has been a symbol of seeded fertility across time and culture. Or, alternatively, the apple could be a message about temptation, as it is also a popular symbol associated with bad decision-making that gets you kicked out of garden parties. Common and cool as dreams are, however, they can be a bit unpredictable and not everyone remembers them. So, another tool for excavating the unconscious, one that has gone by many names and has fluctuated in and out of vogue over millennia, is hypnosis. The concept of hypnosis has been tumbled by the stones of history, a process that has evolved its definition as well as the sentiment it elicits. And while it has been slandered by the skeptics and the academic witch hunters of the world, it is, in the words of Taylor Swift, coming back stronger than a 90s trend. While there are many myths and misconceptions about hypnosis, it is a very real process that can be and is used as a legitimate therapeutic tool. But those of us who are particularly prone to hypnosis, and yes, there is a group of us, more on that shortly, may come across more than sparkling sea urchins and magical mer creatures on our journeys into the unconscious. I can say it absolutely no better than Emily Dickinson in her rather unsettling poem on the unconscious mind. Quote, "One need not be a chamber to be haunted. One need not be a house. The brain has corridors surpassing material place, far safer of a midnight meeting. External ghost, then an interior confronting, that whiter host. Far safer through an abbey gallop, the stones a chase, than moonless one's own self-encounter in lonesome place. Ourself behind ourself concealed, should startle most. Assassin hid in our apartment be horror's least. The prudent carries a revolver, he bolts the door, or looking a superior spectre, more near. Hi, I'm Jessica Carson, and welcome to Patina, a podcast that examines the surprising beauty of all that is dark, shadowy, and seemingly tarnished about the human experience. Let's play. Hypnosis, as we know it today, was popularized in the 19th century by the father of modern hypnosis, an Austrian physician named Franz Mesmer, whose moniker inspired the word, you guessed it, mesmerism. Hypnosis took off in the 19th century, with the earliest use of the term hypnosis used to refer to patients in a trance-like state who seemed rather unaware of their behavior. As the pocket watch swung before them, tick-tock, tick-tock, these patients were lulled into a state in which they seemed to lack conscious awareness of their behavior, and, as a result, their more primal thoughts and feelings bubbled up from the depths toward the surface. Truth be told, neat as the stereotype of pocket watch hypnotism may seem, often depicted in film as being conducted by a bearded white gentleman in 19th century attire, it has more to do with made-for-movie magic than historical fact. Apparently, just about any glimmering object would do. You see, around 1841, Scottish surgeon and pioneering hypnotist James Braid described a recipe for hypnosis, in which one could take any bright object, he used the example of a lancet case, between the fingers, hold it about a foot away from the client's eyes to induce the, quote, greatest possible strain upon the eyes and eyelids, and ask the client to maintain a steady focus. Once in a hypnotic state, the aim was to engross the patient with a single idea or train of thought, rendering them unconscious of, or indifferently conscious to, all other ideas, impressions, or thoughts. It was believed that, in this state, the unconscious mind could be accessed and revealed. It was the controversial figure, your mama done it, Sigmund Freud, who largely popularized the idea of hypnosis, though, ironically, he only endorsed the technique for part of his career. He did, however, believe that the unconscious held troves of information and was responsible for unintended behavior, like Freudian slips. This still popular psychology reference refers to slips of tongue, for example, saying pornography instead of photography, or telling your friend how much you love your husband, but instead you accidentally use your ex's name. It was believed that these slips of tongue were efforts by the unconscious to be made conscious, and that they should be examined for richer, deeper meaning. In the 20th century, psychologist Ernest Jack Hilgard furthered the study of hypnosis, proposing one of the best-known theories, the neo-dissociation theory of hypnosis. In Hilgard's view, people in a hypnotic state experience a hidden observer phenomenon in which their unconscious mind is aware of and can respond to the hypnotist's suggestions, but there's also a dissociated processing of information that takes place on an unconscious level. The hidden observer phenomenon allows individuals to objectively observe their pain without experiencing any actual suffering. In a sense, tapping into the unconscious through hypnosis is like a shortcut into the depths of the ocean to grab a pearl, rise quickly to the surface, and marvel safely at its iridescence in the sunlight. Today, hypnosis is defined as a human condition characterized by heightened focus, reduced peripheral awareness, and an enhanced capacity to respond to suggestion. In other words, during hypnosis, the mind becomes so relaxed that it can hyperfocus on the suggestion at hand, like, for example, reducing pain during childbirth. And I mean this quite literally, there is a whole field dedicated to that act alone. It's called hypnobirth. For those of you who have never been hypnotized before, let me tell you a bit about it. During hypnosis, a practitioner informs you that suggestions for imagination will be presented, and that, once hypnotized, these suggestions can be used to impart helpful and perhaps sometimes life-saving changes to your perception, sensation, emotion, thought, and behavior. In fact, hypnosis has been used to change behaviors related to everything from weight loss to smoking cessation to accessing repressed memories. It's wrong to call anything a panacea, but modern-day therapists are increasingly returning to this antiqued tradition, and for good reason. It can really work. Particularly for 1 out of 10 of us. You heard that right. Approximately 10% of us belong to a special club that we might not even know we're eligible for. The Very Responsive to Hypnosis Club. While 10% of us boast this mesmerizing gift, there is another 10% of us on the other end of the spectrum who are considered difficult or impossible to hypnotize, with 80% of the population lingering in the medium susceptibility category. And while I don't mean to discriminate against anybody's unique wiring, I find us highly susceptible folks to be particularly beguiling, and so we will spend the remainder of today focused on the hypnoprone among us. I don't know about you, but as somebody who has been successfully hypnotized, both by myself and by others on multiple occasions, I am absolutely fascinated by the potential of hypnosis as a therapy, but I'm also equally fascinated by what makes me, and perhaps you as well, so darn good at dissociating from reality and entering into another strange liminal space of consciousness. So, to scratch this itch, let's dive into the makeup of those of us who are highly hypnotizable. First thing to note, hypnotizability is highly stable across a lifetime. So while children are, on a whole, more susceptible than adults to hypnosis, which makes total sense given their sweetly open and imaginative minds, the 30-year-old version of you and the 60-year-old version of you are similarly likely or unlikely to be hypnotized. At a very high level, it seems that the most basic personality link to hypnotizability is openness to experience, and most specifically, openness to feelings. So this group includes those of us who are intellectually and emotionally curious, creative, and imaginative. And this makes quite intuitive sense. People who are open to the idea of hypnosis tend to respond better to hypnosis. And so people who are broadly open to experience will also be more open to, well, hypnosis. But there are other qualities as well. Beyond openness to experience, those of us with qualities like persistence, susceptibility to emotional contagion, and unselfish or self-sacrificing tendencies are particularly prone to hypnosis. So, in other words, those of us who are open yet focused, tender yet persistent, and emotional yet aware are more likely to be hypnotized. And I can't say this is necessarily shocking news. It's pretty intuitive, but I guess the validation is helpful. And as an aside, if you've gotten a good sense of my personality from this episode so far, or have listened to previous episodes of Patina, you can probably begin to understand why I am highly susceptible to hypnosis, as I am very much all of these things. Very emotion, much curious. But as we are wont to do on this podcast, we must also peek at the dirty underbelly of the glistening snake. And so, taking a deep breath, I will now present to you the caveat for those highly hypnotizable souls among us. Because, well, it ain't all unicorns and kombucha. Research has shown that there are two distinct types of highly hypnotizable subjects: fantasizers and dissociators. So, from the outset, not immediately complementary. Fantasizers are those among us who are quite skilled at blocking out reality, even when not under the spell of hypnosis, and often prefer to luxuriate in our daydreams instead. We are quite imaginative, if not a bit delusionally so, and it's a pattern that has been with us since childhood. Us fantasizers tend to report having imaginary friends as children, and childhood homes in which imaginary play was encouraged. In short, us fantasizers exhibit extreme involvement in imaginative activity, whether for the purposes of our creative work or, say, daydreaming about romantic partners. Dissociators, on the other hand, daydream just as much as fantasizers, but their daydreams are more about going blank or zoning out than creating a fantasy land. In fact, many dissociators actually report difficulty creating any imagery through their sensory modalities. Dissociators prefer to lose themselves in numbness and forget unpleasant events, a tendency that is often sadly born out of childhood abuse or other trauma. For dissociators, the earliest memories tend to start around the age of 3, with some not remembering anything before the ages of 6 to 8 years old. And so, whether you're more of a fantasizer or a dissociator, the long and short of it is, there are some real shadows associated with our openness to hypnosis, whether that shadow manifests as delusional imagination or the complete lack thereof. Both groups, fantasizers and dissociators, are not particularly planted in reality, and this very truth acts as a surprisingly excellent substrate for the hypnotic process. In fact, researchers have concluded that those of us who are hypnotizable might have experiences that, quote, more reality-based people cannot, end quote. It's believed that our loose relationship with reality is why we hypnotizable people also react better to placebos and are more likely to accept paranormal or religious experiences. So basically, it's me. But even though sitting in the category of, quote, not very reality-based people may sound like a bit of a passive-aggressive insult, there is true magic to be excavated within this personality. those of us who play amidst worlds, reality and fantasy, earthly and ethereal, waking states and dream states, are perhaps best positioned to touch the furthest edges of consciousness and return with great treasures in the form of wisdom, insight, and inspiration. It perhaps underscores the lesson that the mind of the truly creative or innovative person can't be too grounded in reality. In the words of the alchemist's author, Paulo Coelho, "Every day I try to be in communication with the universe in an unconscious way." I mean, whether you're Pablo Picasso, Taylor Swift, or Elon Musk, it helps to have one foot on the earth and the other a bit closer to the stars. To be a truly great creative, it may in fact be mandatory to have access to the unconscious part of ourselves that is unlimited, that believes in magic, and that pursues the impossible. Trance-like states are essential within the canon of our psychological human history and have been noted in shamanistic, druidic, voodoo, yogic, and other religious traditions. The earliest references to hypnosis date back to ancient Egypt and Greece, with hypnos being Greek for sleep. In 2600 BC, the Chinese medical texts referred to processes similar to hypnosis, and in 1500 BC, the Hindu Vedas outlined hypnotic procedures. Avicenna, a Persian physician, described a hypnotic state when writing about a trance in 1027. Though its definition has shifted much over the years, there is something uniquely entrancing, pun intended, about the possibility of achieving an altered state of reality in which we can obtain obscured or even mystical information. The 1887 painting that headlines this episode is titled Hypnotic Seance and depicts a woman in a hypnotic state attempting to communicate with spirits from the afterlife. While most modern-day therapists don't use hypnosis as a means of spirit communication, though some, like modern-day psychiatrist Dr. Brian Weiss, do use it to retrieve past life memories, highly recommend checking out his work, this was nonetheless a mighty popular use case amidst the blossoming spiritualism movement in the 19th century. Even the likes of First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln participated, with her peculiar passion of organizing seances inside the White House. Fast forward to modern day, in an eerie and almost humorous plot twist, the possibility of achieving mystical connection through hypnosis has sparked dread among the masses. In the 1980s and 1990s, Americans swirled in a moral panic around satanic ritual abuse. While the flames of this fear were fueled by events of the 1970s, like the Zodiac Killer, Alphabet Killer, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, the Hillside Stranglers, and the Son of Sam, among, unfortunately, many others, complemented by movies like The Exorcist and reinvigorated by the popularity of the Ouija board, the real kicker was the heavy metal genre, which many believed was brainwashing, or otherwise maliciously hypnotizing, American teenagers with subliminal messages to worship the devil and carry out his work in the form of sexual immorality, murder, and suicide. While we now know that you cannot be hypnotized against your will, the notion of tapping into the unconscious mind without consent remains perhaps one of the most fearful possibilities of all. And so, while we need not fear that, like Derek Zoolander, we will be hypnotized to Mugatu's song Relax to kill the Prime Minister of Malaysia, we must nonetheless use our beautiful openness with discernment. The wiring of the hypnotizable mind is magical indeed, and with big magic comes big responsibility. The unconscious is deep, and it can be dark. So, while I encourage you to swim in the current of your mesmerizing self, excavating the sea of your unconscious to the depth and degree that satisfies you, I will ask you this, dear listener. Please, always be very, very careful with what you find. That's all for today's episode of Patina, written and produced by me, Jessica Carson, with the help of my partner in crime, Jeffrey Sayers. With any luck, it's helped you to look into a shadowy aspect of your human experience with a bit more hope and a lot more curiosity. If you like Patina, I think you'll really enjoy our other offerings. From online courses, to books, to group and individual coaching and consulting, we warmly invite you as a seeker to dive deep with us into all that is beautiful about the shadows within yourself, your company, your relationships, and our society at large. So give us a follow and maybe even drop us a note on how we can play together. After all, the shadows are a lot more friendly when we play.